Welcome to our Future of Fireside Chat podcast powered by InFUUSE. I'm your host, Tanyette Cologne. In our Future of podcast, we bring together an extraordinary panel of futurists, disruptors, innovators, and dreamers for an electrifying virtual roundtable discussion. Our mission is simple yet ambitious: to blueprint action items that will create a more inclusive world. We believe that even amidst chaos, there is always an opportunity to create positive change. In this podcast, we will explore the current landscape and identify key trends and challenges that are shaping the future of work, the future of business, the future of health, and our society as a whole. We will gather insights and perspectives from a diverse range of experts who can bring unique viewpoints and experiences to the table. Our goal is to use the roundtable discussion as a starting point for a larger conversation and movement towards a more inclusive and equitable world. Join us as we explore questions such as how technology can be leveraged to help humanity, what challenges are facing marginalized communities in the workplace, and how we can build more resilient and adaptable communities that can withstand the disruptions of the 21st century. By the end of this podcast, we hope to have identified specific action items and recommendations that will help us create a more just and sustainable future. So sit back, relax, and get ready for an electrifying and thought-provoking discussion with our incredible panel of experts. This is the Future of, powered by InFUUSE. Welcome to the Future of Fireside Chat series. This topic today is the future of health. Unlock your potential with gut optimization so that you can fuel your output. But like I like to discuss, you also fuel yourself in the process, and it becomes a gift that keeps on giving. I'm your host, Tanyette Cologne, and I wanted to ground into the ethos of the whole Future of series and why we decided and why we're passionate to launch it. It's simple yet ambitious. Our whole goal is to really highlight thought leaders, trailblazers, change makers, social impact, humans that are out in the world. Some of them will never know their name, that are advocating for a more beautiful world, which was the inspiration from Charles Eisenstein's book that has that name in the title. So our goal is really simple. We want to inspire you through their stories, and then also give you actionable insights so that once you're inspired, you can go out into the world and start creating the change that you dream into. And that can be different for all of us. We'll start with this quote before I introduce our esteemed panelists. And it's a simple one, but it's one to feel into because I feel, I'm a founder myself, that it's easy to bypass health. And we negotiate our health away in pursuit of status or in pursuit of career, et cetera. And this quote is by A.J. Materi, and it says, so many spend their health gaining wealth and then have to spend their wealth to regain the health that they lost. And this is so true in so many ways. So we'll get right to it because we have an incredible panelist today, and my heart is definitely full. They have a textured background and experience, but they meld in beautifully for the topic today. First on deck, we have Sonia Lee, who is a meditation and mindfulness teacher and expert. She also is a former Fortune 500 business consultant. She comes from the tech world, so she sees it from all different points of views. In full transparency, I'm part of her meditation community that she just launched. And I can say as a founder, it's been incredibly grounding to be able to go into her container is so sacred and to really just leave my heart there and go through the journey of grounding into the now, which is so important when you're building something. Next up, and Swathi, if I pronounce your name incorrectly, let me know. It's Swathi Arogupe.
Yes.
Nagendra, correct?
Yes.
And you are the founder and CEO of Better Meal AI, which is its first of its kind app that has a lot of science and data behind it. It's tackling obviously gut health, nutrition, diabetes, et cetera. Swathi brings an enormous amount of management and entrepreneurial experience with innovation from having worked in many startups. As a founding data scientist, she's obviously passionate about gut and nutrition. She's a big advocate there. And one of the things I loved about her bio is she won a Global Impact Challenge Award for her NGO, Selflessness Movement, which helps prevent suicide in farmers from India, which I thought, or in India, which I think is huge. Dr. Natanya Wachtel is an award winning customer marketing expert with extensive experience growing and scaling B2B and D2C businesses, leveraging behavioral science principles and emerging digital tools. For over 20 years, Dr. Wachtel has built effective go to market strategies for significant health and wellness brands. I mean, she does a lot in mental health, in med tech. She sits on the foundation of the Chopra. She sits on the board of the Chopra Foundation and does a lot to empower women, diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera. We actually met back in 2020 during the height of it in a business networking app called Lunch Club. And I always love to see how these relationships continue to evolve as we journey through life. And last but not least, he's the lucky gentleman that gets to sit on this panel with these fierce women, is Dr. Vincent Pedre, who is a leading functional medicine physician and thought leader. He's also the author of the newly published Gut Smart Protocol, and it talks a lot into how to revitalize your health, boost your energy, but also that even health in general and gut health is not one size fits all. So he speaks to that as well. So we're going to get started, and we'll go around the horn with our panel with their origin story, because I feel it's important for us to understand, like, how did they arrive to the space to innovate and be passionate about creating impact in gut health, mental health, and the health world. So Natanya, I'll start with you first. Like, how did you actually arrive to being an innovator in health and wellness?
Oh, thank you, I guess, for having me go first. So I'm very, very thankful to be here today. And my journey to the gut is sort of embarrassing, but I'm going to be honest about it to say I should have known better a long time ago. I had been working in the pharmaceutical industry for years, have a background in behavioral psychology, and was not taking care of my own self in the process, directly related to your quote, Tanyette, as you opened, right? So I prided myself on, working so hard that, sleep was a secondary attribute. Food was sort of when it was there, and got to some health situations where I had to kind of take stock in everything and how to reset. And during that time, I started really reading and informing myself and kind of following the principles I had been a part of, shaping and guiding for thousands and upon millions of folks' lives across the country, across the globe, and doing those things for myself, including that sort of whole self-care mindset that felt gratuitous for some reason. We were always last. So that's how I kind of started, had sort of, the statistical significance N of one with myself. But I also started getting involved and shifted my company focus to look at not only information and education and empowerment in terms of like gut health and the gut brain, especially with mood and mental health, but also looking at food poverty, because of the fact that, it's one thing to help people learn about this information. It's another thing for them to be able to afford fresh fruit and vegetables, because I also work a lot with health disparities. So, and education disparities. So that's kind of how that came to be. And I can transition it to say another full disclosure is I'm very happy to say I work alongside Swathi and am an advisor to Better Meal AI. And it just couldn't come at a better time. And my heart really leapt at the opportunity, because it was a way to connect what I was doing sort of on the side passionately, into sort of the foundational things of the day-to-day work life.
And that's a beautiful segue to go to Swathi and her story about how she arrived to even creating Better Meal AI. What was the catalyst in your life journey to get to this place?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Tanya, for being here, and thank you, Natanya, for mentioning about Better Meal. We are very glad to have you as an advisor. So Better Meal started from my own journey. I was actually suffering from pre-diabetes when I was a teenager. So I was diagnosed at 15 or 16 years of age, and went to a lot of doctors, but I was just advised that I had to be on medications all my life. So not even pre-diabetes, I was even diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which was kind of, you know, it comes with like a lot of like imbalance, and that kind of creates an environment in your mental health that takes a toll, definitely. So followed that by even obesity. So I was like super obese, very low on confidence. It kind of affected my day to day life. So when doctors told me, okay, you just have to be on medications all your life, that just did not go well with me. There should be something out there. I felt like my life was over at 16, because of the medications. Slowly I kind of started to understand, like the triggering foods, like, that is kind of affecting my body. So like I just shifted my focus on medications to nutrition more, and I was very mindful in the choices I made. So somehow I could kind of lose weight and reduce those symptoms, but actually not fix my gut health, because I was just adding the inflammatory things again and again. And that ended up with me having a lot of like gut health issues like IBD and acid reflux, gut, everything. So multiple endoscopies, and I'm like, okay, this is not going anywhere. I'm not just not like fixing my health. One stopped and another thing started. So that's when I got introduced to gut health, and it's like so important, like to the overall health. I really understood the importance of it. As we all know, gut is the longest organ in a human body. It starts from your tongue and it goes all the way through your anal gland. So and I was really messing up with that, like by not giving the right food it needs. So once I shifted the focus and started to focus on gut, my good gut based nutrition, I could reverse all my health issues, and I started blogging about the same. A lot of people were very much interested in my story, really wanted to like follow the same thing with their symptoms. And that's when I thought, okay, why don't I just convert this to an app? And I had a co-founder whom we teamed up, and we started to do a lot of trials on gut health, and here we are where we have the app out today.
I love that. As a segue, Dr. Pedro, I know for you, it was partially personal, but then in your practice in New York City, you were seeing a lot of patients coming through. So do you want to talk about your origin story, how this came to be for you?
Yeah, and thank you for having me here on this panel. It started when I was a child, and I'm not sure which part came first. I do remember having some pretty severe abdominal pains as a child, and being up in the middle of the night, crying. But somewhere in there, I was on antibiotics, and they kept putting me on antibiotics over and over. And I've calculated that I was probably on 20 plus rounds of antibiotics as a teenager, from the age of 10 to the age of 19, 2 to 3 times per year. And little did they know that it was damaging. It was causing what could have almost been irreversible damage to my gut microbiome. And as a result, I developed leaky gut and developed food sensitivities of all sorts, especially to wheat and dairy. And little did I know that these foods were causing major problems, and I was continuing to eat them. Part of the reason that I went to medical school, aside from my love of science and humanities and helping people, was really to biohack why do I get sick and how can I not get sick so often. And the funny thing is that I didn't really learn it in medical school. The only thing that I was always very keenly observing and noted, kind of like you, Swati, like looking at the diet, I had a shift in my diet when I started medical school where I didn't have as much dairy. And at that point, I noted that I wasn't getting sick as easily as I was before that. And so even though I wasn't being taught nutrition in medical school, I was taking notes of subtle little things like this because I was on this constant quest to have a strong immune system. But later on, it turned into fatigue, into brain fog. I developed during my residency eczema on my hands. I thought that it was the gloves, the washing of the hands, but it was really reactions to gluten, to wheat, and the diet was just not good. And it wasn't until I discovered functional medicine after I had already been trained as a doctor and done my residency and was already working in my own practice. And I was always searching for the truth. And intuitively, I knew that Western medicine had not provided me with the entire picture of what the real truth is on how we achieve health from the root cause. And wasn't until I discovered functional medicine and learned about the gut microbiome, learned about leaky gut, learned about the health of the gut and how that affects the rest of the body, then realized, looking back at my life, that I had been poisoned with antibiotics. And look, antibiotics save lives, but they also come with major consequences for people. And I see that every day in my practice. So actually, the gut was the least sexy organ system that I ever thought I would be involved with, because I mean, who wants to talk about poop? I mean, it's just not, it's not what I thought I was going to be. And actually, when I was in my residency training, I had the chief of GI at Mount Sinai, which is one of the top leading GI centers in the country, take me aside after he had spent a week with us, rounding. He was the guest attending, and said that if I wanted to become a gastroenterologist, that I should speak with him directly. So basically inviting me, and I just looked at him and I thought, yeah, no, I don't want to stick tubes in people's mouths and behinds. But I didn't realize that I would end up becoming an accidental gut expert through functional medicine, because I became very curious as a result of my own experience with what patients were coming in with, IBS and migraines, IBS and allergies, asthma, IBS and autoimmunity. So they had gut issues, but they also had other issues, mental fog. And I started working with them with this new paradigm that I was learning, and they would get better. And what was surprising is that things that they didn't even sometimes report to me would get better. And they said, I never told you about these other symptoms, but they actually improved by the work that we're doing on the gut. And they would refer their friends, their family, their coworkers. And so one day I woke up and realized that I'm like becoming a gut expert, because I say that in quotation marks, because honestly, it is a road I've been on for over a decade, but I don't know that you ever arrive to become a gut expert. I mean, I sat and read so much research as part of this book, and even just to do interviews. And it's endless what we can learn about the microbiome and about the gut. It's just, there's so many things to learn and so many pathways that I think we're only at the very beginning of understanding of the true impact that our gut has on the rest of the body, including, like you talked about, Natanya, the brain, the gut-brain connection, so important. And that was the inspiration for writing my first book, Happy Gut, and then my second book, which I think is really my dream book. That would have been, I wish it was my first book, but I had to have my first book to write the second book. But the second book has everything that I would have wanted to have put in my first book, but I didn't have all the experience to do that. And it's a personalized plan, understanding that not everyone with gut issues can be treated the same, that each person is a unique individual.
And we'll start talking about those details in a minute, but I wanted to get to Sonia's origin story, because we talk about Western medicine and she has a beautiful history that is in the world of Eastern. So I wanted her to share her story as well.
Yeah, I'll bring this home for everyone. So my origin story is I had a very spiritual upbringing in a household where I became, or am, born into third generation meditation practices. And not only that, but I also was raised on a Buddhist monastery with monks and nuns at a very young age, where mindfulness and what we eat is a big part of being present. And that's how we practice self-care, self-compassion. Now, my career took me into business, and I was working with a lot of really big companies, and I started my own consulting agency as well, working with Fortune 500 companies. What I found in my time working with entrepreneurs in startups, in big corporations, is everybody's chasing innovation. They all want to be smarter, they want to work faster, they want to work better. But there's a direct correlation. And I found myself in a situation where I was experiencing burnout over and over again. And it was because I was addicted to achievement And when you're addicted to achievement and you're chasing this idea of creativity and innovation, something has to give. And usually it's diet. Either you overcompensate or you undercompensate. And that affects your mood, your productivity, your focus. So after having gone through a couple rounds of burnout, I finally learned my lesson and realized, hey guys, like I can go back to my basics. And I can just teach meditation and bridge the gap between what entrepreneurs want to do and what they want to achieve, and incorporate mindfulness practices while using tactical, real strategic approaches into being caring and compassionate to oneself. So yeah, that's I'm really glad to be here. That's my story.
No, I'm loving how this panel is like, it just feels so like home. So we'll start diving into the ecosystem that is the gut. And Dr. Pedre, we'll start with you because you write to it so beautifully in your book on how to explain. We know the gut is a seed to immunity, but help us understand like the human gut biome as an ecosystem and the importance of the microbiome diversity and balance, because you do explain it in a way that most people can comprehend it.
Well, first by starting to explain that the gut microbiome is one of many microbiomes in the body. There's a microbiome in the throat, there's a microbiome in the nose, on our skin, in the creases of the skin, in the vaginal canal, inside of the throat, and as well as the stomach. But the biggest reservoir of the microbiome is the large intestine, estimated at 100 trillion bacteria, with anywhere between 500 to 1,000 different species, with a total DNA content that outnumbers our own DNA 10 to 1, or actually, I think it might be even 100 to 1. And so it's producing all these incredible postbiotic nutrients that if you look at the human genome, it's believed that we don't encode for enough genes to run our own bodies, that actually we are dependent on this microbiome. And I like to say that diversity is the holy grail of the microbiome. You want diversity. Now, the path to diversity can be argued. There's many different paths, I think, to diversity. And, we talk about having a diverse diet. And yet, as part of the research that I did for this book, I went to Africa and spent 3 days and 2 nights with the Hadza, one of the last hunter-gatherer groups on the planet. And they don't have the most diverse diet, but why I was really fascinated to see them is because they have a very diverse gut microbiome. And someone actually tested their stool and looked at their microbial diversity in comparison to an Italian cohort control group, and found that their gut microbiome was much more diverse. Now, why would this be important? It's because the Hadza have no diabetes, they have no heart disease, they have no obesity, they have no dementia, they do not get cancer. So they have no diseases of modern man. They're not exposed to antibiotics like we are. They have an incredible amount of resilience. But more importantly, it's this microbial diversity that we're really harming with the overuse of antibiotics that is happening worldwide. And in some countries where you can just walk up to the pharmacy and get an antibiotic without a doctor's prescription. But even with doctor prescriptions, the CDC estimates that 30 to 35, maybe even up to 40% of the antibiotic prescriptions in this country are prescribed unnecessarily, that they are not given for infections that would require an antibiotic. So we're wiping out our microbial diversity. And I know we're not talking about that, but it also ties into the use of pesticides and how pesticides are wiping out the microbial diversity of our soil. And I look at the outside world as a reflection of what's happening on the inside world. And we can't say that we are isolated from what's happening in our environment. We're affecting our food supply. We're affecting the nutrients in our food. And as a result, we're also affecting the nutrients that are available for us. And so microbial diversity is what you want, because what the studies are showing is that the more diverse your gut microbiome is, the lower your inflammatory markers are. So they did one study, Stanford University, where they looked at this and they found that microbial diversity through eating fermented foods lowered 19 different inflammatory markers. And if you understand chronic disease, inflammation is the common root cause for every chronic disease on the planet. So if we want to lower inflammation, one of our biggest access points to lower that inflammation is actually our gut. And that's the missing link that now everybody is paying attention to, that in naturopathic medicine, they've known this for over 100 years. And yet with allopathic medicine, we look to the outside to cure things with pharmaceuticals, with drugs, and we forgot that we have this incredible healing machine inside of us. And we have these incredible helpers that are our gut ecosystem, our gut microbiome, that forms an ecosystem that supports the health of the body. But if it's out of balance, it's actually going to support the evolution of disease within your body.
Swati, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to expand on a lot of things. Thank you, Dr. Pedre, for mentioning a lot of critical things that we are facing today. Definitely, even in our own studies, we have tested a lot of foods, and to Dr. Pedre's point, we are actually killing the microbiomes in the soil itself. So, like there is environment change happening. We are using a lot of pesticides for more produce, but that, like it's a cycle effect that actually is harming us more than, the environment itself. Because when we tested the food, as of today, theoretically, we are of an understanding that there is certain percentage of vitamins in a particular fruit. But that's not the true point, because we have tested and validated this, and we are no longer having that amount of vitamin. I always get this from my family members. So, they're always taunting in a way that, you are always sick. You're like that sick kid, you eat little and you're always sick. You're dependent on medications and everything. At our time, we used to be like super healthy. And they're not lying, but unfortunately, they don't understand that at that point of time, they did not kill the essence of the soil so much. So we had, good amount of, like nutrients. And to talk a little bit about gut health, I think Dr. Pedre covered a lot of critical points. And also, I just wanted to mention this point about, the thin layer, in our gut, which is a thin lining in our gut that actually like helps absorption of these vitamins as well, if it is taken in terms of supplements. But even if that layer is kind of like, very, it's like a rug where, it's kind of very tight in junction, a good gut. But what happens when the lining is really like softer is like, it kind of opens up. There is more zonula protein production, which kind of opens up that rug kind of a layer, and everything can seep in. All the toxins kind of can get into the bloodstream. So, and it unfortunately doesn't even help the vitamins to be absorbed better. So there is no use happening, with an inflamed gut. So it is so important to fix that with the right nutrition. And I know like nutrition is like very underlooked as of today, but unfortunately, that is the case, where we are so much dependent on just medications to even fix the gut rather than depending on food to actually fix it. So yeah.
And I want to go to Sonia next, but I do want to bring a comment from the audience. Steve says burgers and fries have nearly killed our ancestral microbiome. The Western diet has derailed our evolution. So Sonia, I wanted to get some feedback from you on your thoughts on this.
I mean, it's really interesting. If we go back to the basics of how we in our ancestry used to feed ourselves colorful foods, right? We would eat from the earth. And nowadays, food comes in packages. We got chips, we got sodas, and it's just not natural. So if we choose to eat the rainbow, so to speak, then we can, really supplement our intestines. And not only that, we have better poop.
It's It's a
And
simple formula.
I'd love to add a bit, if I could, just to the end, to say, your audience is a mixed group. So a lot of the professionals might be like, yeah, that's great. And you have sort of these proactive health manager type folks who may or may not be ready and willing to hear some of this information. And so I want to also kind of put a little side bent on it around, this isn't a blame and shame, I think, initiative here. It's really just to highlight there are things you can do. And if you think about whether it's entrepreneurship, work-life balance, your own personal goals, it's like a performance, like an athlete would approach their athleticism. When you want to optimize how your brain can retain information, how your body can move and perform in, a physical way, whether it's typing or running. And so, another thing that we're doing, with the Chopra Foundation and all these other organizations that we're working together is also, like you said, to be this bridge from taking these, I think you said, Dr. Pedri, hundreds of years old learning and understanding in many communities, and so near you as well, right? In terms of breath work, meditation, mindfulness, and whether you call it those things or you just call it breathing or movement, but that's not the important part. It's that it's all tied to the whole body system, and it's within your control to optimize. So the you that you think you are, I have this, I am tired, I can't sleep, I have psoriasis. Those are labels that don't have to be fixed, and meaning fixed to you, and that you can move through change. And it can be something as simple as just taking a moment to say, okay, today I'm going to try to do something a little differently, and I'm going to think about what I'm putting into my body, or what time I go to bed, or if I'm going to get some fresh air. And I think I just wanted to kind of bridge that, because I have been in situations, and myself included, where I knew all of the information. That doesn't mean I was able to take it within myself.
Yeah, I want to jump back in. I think that you're so right that we all have a choice. And again, this is not to shame anyone at all. I know that when I was going through some of my serious heavy launches in my previous companies, it was so much easier to reach for a burger and a soda, like go swing around to your local joint, than it would be to choose a healthy alternative. And I think what we can all do to support ourselves as busy professionals is to choose to consume things that make us feel good. And our bodies may not be used to it. And so there's, a time where we have to become accustomed to it. It doesn't happen overnight. But when you slowly start to migrate into these healthier choices, it makes it a little bit easier. I also want to say that there are more restaurants available to us on different food delivery services where you can order healthier options. So perhaps not a vegan place, but a lot of these restaurants have salads or proteins or whatever it is that's available to you. And it doesn't always have to be a burger and soda.
Someone's being funny. They're like, Skittles for everyone. Taste the rainbow.
Yes, I love this too.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, Swati talked about her health journey, and thank you, Sean. I mean, we all talked about this in some regard. For myself, making changes wasn't, even though I had a major sort of life and death health event situation, I wasn't able to make them all right away. I work in behavior change, so I decided to do those sort of micro changes for myself anyway, and reward and celebrate those. So if you drink a lot of soda, yes, it's ubiquitously researched, it's not so great for you, but maybe giving it up entirely is not something you can do cold turkey. Maybe you just have to start with, what if I just had cut it in half for this week? And so I think that's another thing that I'd love to make sure we walked away from today with, is that taking all of this information in and taking those micro steps, each thing you do in a positive direction is going to help you. And you can start to check it and see it in your blood values everywhere else. And whether that be, if you love a burger and fries, I mean, this might make Dr. Pedri cringe, but I'm not saying that, it's about giving everything up. Yes, of course, these things, there's carcinogens in the food, there's less nutrients, but if we really want to affect change in a real way that's sustained, it's all about just kind of committing to the first step. And I just wanted to make sure we spoke about that, because I know that if it's new, it can be overwhelming to think about all of the areas of impact. It's almost terrifying to think about the skin and the heart and the brain and the guts and all those places in the body at once to think how, like, there's analysis paralysis. So I just wanted to kind of bring it back to that as well, that I think some of it is pick one thing that you can change this week and then reward yourself from that and build upon it.
I love that.
Great
Micro
point.
moments
Great
and
point. Yeah, great point, Natanya. To add to that, just again wanted to switch gears to gut health back again. Definitely, Dr. Pedrick can join me if he agrees. An inflamed gut will, it makes it harder for all these mindful, like practices. I've been there, trust me. So I had like such bad gut inflammation that it affected my willpower. And of course, there is a science behind that, right? We all know about the vagus nerve that goes directly from, our gut to brain. And it's like a truth. It's not only that, it's like so many other things associated with that. So there is a lot more complex connection between the gut and brain. So an inflamed gut will never actually let you make those mindful practices. The mind is kind of wandering around. It's kind of like wired to burgers and skittles and all those things. And also, like, meditation is a very important aspect of it. I've been meditating myself for all these years, and I sit 1 hour, like, every day in meditation. That's kind of my powerhouse. And with an inflamed gut, I just couldn't concentrate clearly. There is mental fog happening, so you don't know what even meditation feels like with an inflamed gut. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. I was reading some other studies as well regarding meditation and gut health. So people, who go through a little bit of like that scratch of realization, that wisdom realization or enlightenment, they had a good gut. That's the exact reason that they could actually get to that level of like enlightenment. So Sonia might agree in that, like, many practitioners, years, they only focus on mindful eating and mental health, and that kind of goes hand in hand because their gut has sustained well enough to help their mental health balance out better. But an inflamed gut will never let a person, like, have a great willpower or start mindful practices. So everything again comes down to that, and once that is kind of like taken care of, it's really easier to have these other things come naturally, like simple changes in life. It just comes naturally, it flows through. So through my experience, and most of our users as well have experienced the same thing.
well, that point is actually true. In order for you to really, so that you don't go back to those patterns, your physical body first has to be grounded in, and then the practices of breath work and meditation help to amplify those efforts. I want to take it to Dr. Pedre because I know in your book you talk a lot about how gut health is not one size fits all. There's elements to like eating times, primary food groups, but I know we can't blueprint it for everyone today, but are there some primary elements that people should keep in mind if they're new to gut health or they're focusing more on it right now?
Well, the most important thing, so obviously there are some broad strokes that we can talk about that are what I call gut disruptors. And these foods or nutrients or whatever they are, they come in and they might cause a dysbiosis, an imbalance between good and bad bugs, or they can increase your gut permeability. So one big gut disruptor, please don't shoot me, is alcohol. Yeah. That's a big one. Yeah. And that's a broad stroke for everyone. So even though my book is about personalizing the plan to the individual, I can say across the board, if you want to heal your gut, alcohol needs to be out. It's not just the sugar in the alcohol, but it's also the alcohol itself is a disinfectant, right? We use alcohol to wipe surfaces clean. What's doing the same thing in the body, but it's also been shown in research that it increases gut permeability, it increases inflammation, it causes weight gain, it scrambles your internal hormones, so you put on more fat in the middle. So alcohol is out. There's some other things that can either be good or bad for the gut. Too much coffee and caffeine in coffee is very acidic. It can cause overproduction of acid in the stomach, but also can be really irritating to the gut lining. There's also a lot of benefits to coffee. So coffee is one of those kind of shady gray areas. And of course, artificial sweeteners, excess sugar. Sugar is one of the most inflammatory substances on the planet. And it's going to support the growth of bad bacteria and yeast in the gut that then can hijack your brain by producing mycotoxins that make you crave more sugar, and you think that you need to eat more sugar, and it's not really your brain. It's your brain is being hijacked by the mycotoxins being produced by the yeast in your gut. We get rid of the yeast, then the sugar cravings disappear. Gluten is another big one. And a lot of people might, I know there's a lot of controversy around gluten, but our food supply has been, transformed by this hybridization of wheat to create this dwarf wheat that has 30 to 50% more gluten. I can't tell you how many people I've seen come from other countries to the US and then start getting sick because of eating the wheat here that's different from the wheat they were eating in their homeland. So all these things are really important. Of course, it can get overwhelming, like Natanya was saying. Like, I like to call it stepwise activations. So you decide on what is the first thing that you can conquer, and you do that, and that's your first stepwise activation, and you celebrate it. Then you go on to the next activation. And I'm always asking patients, okay, so what is the first thing we can do? Can stop eating bread at the table when you go to a restaurant? Great. So we conquer that. Then can we take bread out from the home? And you keep doing these little stepwise activations, and they add up to these little wins that eventually get you these big noticeable effects. But you also have to realize, if you're listening, that you might do a couple of stepwise activations. This is inflammation in your body, and this is the threshold below which inflammation needs to get for you to start seeing changes. For example, losing weight. And you might have several months here of healing where you feel frustrated because you've done this, this, and this. And why am I not getting better? Why am I not losing weight? Well, you haven't dropped below the threshold where the body can start to heal. And sometimes, if you're struggling with things like your weight, with shedding fat, it may be that the gut is so inflamed that you need to get to that point where you've reduced inflammation enough that your body now can start shedding the weight, can start to heal itself. So it's important to realize that, to not get frustrated along the way. And sometimes it takes multiple stepwise activations to get to that threshold where you drop your inflammation low enough that you start seeing the effects in the body. And during this time, that it could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be 3 months, you just have to have faith that you're doing the right things and that you're going to get there.
Yeah. So to add to Dr. Pedre's point, so we follow certain protocols whenever a user, comes into, our application. The first step, as Dr. Pedre mentioned, we do is eliminate certain foods from our diet, like dairy, gluten, like even certain vegetable oils, like we only recommend a different sort of oils even for cooking. Second thing is we help people add more to their diet, which is adding fibers. Fiber is a superfood for the biomes. It literally feeds on that. And support, like we really help our users get the adequate support, because it's a journey. It's like, again, micro steps, like Dr. Pedre was mentioning. We need some support through this journey, because it had taken all these years to inflame the gut and to get it right, it takes some time as well. So they need that support from either a therapist or a family member or whoever it might be that they believe in. And finally, once they're at a good stage, then enrich phase, where we help them add those micro in like a little bit of micro, okay, like introduce little bit of gluten in your diet but not too much, because the gut should not get accustomed to a particular way of eating, then it's going to be really hard. So this has really worked for us, like these steps, the breakdown has really worked for us, where they could focus on each step slowly, for a few months, and then move on to the next step towards the recovery journey.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
and that's that little nuance of how you frame it. Giving something up is sort of like a diet, and diets don't work. We all know that, right? So I can't have this. I mustn't have this. If that overrides your thinking, sometimes that initial impulse is to, like you said, Dr. Pedro, like it's literally stimulating you to crave it, right? So you can't fight that. But if you reframe the approach to, I want to go towards this health, then you're sort of shifting. I'm making this choice instead of this choice. I'm making this choice instead of this choice. Instead of what I shouldn't, it's I would like to try. And that's kind of like a very different pivot for myself and for all the people that I've worked with over the years and in literature, right? It's that simple, but it really is. Whether it's Atomic Habits you're reading for your business or for within yourself, it's really, yes, there are going to be some difficult changes. But if you look at them as betterment, each one, it's a little bit easier to think about them and do them stepwise, as everyone mentioned.
I do want to go to, sorry.
I was just going to piggyback on that and say it's a shift from thinking of being on a diet as deprivation to being on a plan where you're choosing your health and you're choosing nourishment.
Yeah. Food as fuel.
Yeah. I've been without sugar and gluten for, I think, close to 1.5 years right now. At least sugar, I've not touched it at all, unless there is something really, Indian family events are like pretty huge. At that point of time, it becomes very critical that you eat it, you taste it. But other than that, my lifestyle has been without, like sugar and gluten. And I cannot say how much of an impact it does on your daily life. I'm sitting with one of my family member, and once it hits like 4 p.m., they're like, "I'm craving sweet. I'm craving sugar." So this is what it does. Like it's like it's kind of wired into your brain, but I think it's a choice, it's a decision you make that, okay, I'm just gonna get rid of, and you feel so good, like getting rid of that. You no longer crave that because your brain rewires to that kind of, like a diet on it. It's not a diet, it's like eating on a daily basis. And trust me, with I don't feel that I've left out anything in my life, I've given up anything in my life, that I've given up dairy and sugar and gluten. I don't feel like, I'm losing something very important in my life, because it's, like I still enjoy, like good pizza, which is gluten-free pizza. I still enjoy those. I still eat everything what everyone is doing, but in a healthier way. That's it. So it's not like giving up on it. It's just making those shift, that change.
It's just a small shift. We have to, I know Sonia's leaving soon. She's going to have to pop off in 5 minutes, and we're running a little bit longer. So I want to make sure the audience leaves with everything that we set the intention for. One question before I go to Sonia that has come up, and it's the first thing that popped into my mind as Dr. Pedri was speaking about the repeat offenders, coffee and alcohol. A few audience members asked if wine is included in that equation. It is?
Unfortunately, yes. But if you're going to drink wine, honestly, look for a biodynamic wine. Stay away from wines where they've added brewer's yeast, and it's better to have wines from France and from Italy where the grapes have been fermented with a natural yeast that grows on the grapes themselves. And also the added sulfites. There are a lot of people who are sulfur sensitive, and unfortunately, a lot of wineries add sulfites as a preservative. It's actually an antibacterial agent that's used to keep the wine sterile while it's being stored before it gets bottled. But wines in countries like Italy and France, where it's being bottled in the same estate where the grapes were picked, they don't have to do that. So the grapes have sulfites, but not added sulfites. But if you're fixing your gut, then you should not drink wine.
sad for me. I'm going to be doing your cleanse soon, but I wanted to go to Sonia, because we talk in your book. You cover it too, Dr. Pedre, breath work and meditation, right? Because we do have a nervous system that's on fight or flight, inflamed, inflammation in the body. And then we have to also use other tools to start grounding back in as we're repairing our gut health. So I wanted Sonia to speak to that. I know she's worked with a lot of clients in the past with grounding them more into the now as they're journeying in and making these good micro moment choices to be more intentional with what they put in their body. So I wanted to just get your feedback before you leave us soon.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I work with a lot of people who make the comment, I can't meditate. It's so hard. It's just, I tried it and it just doesn't work. And my response to that is, it doesn't work if you try to go from 0 to 100. So meditation is not the practice of shutting down your thoughts, but rather it's learning to dance with them and allowing them to arise without any judgment, any blame, any shame at all. So when we're practicing meditation and you are distracted, you say, oh, hello, what an interesting thought, but this is my time. I'm going to release you. So when you start to approach mindfulness from that manner, as you learning to dance with your thoughts, you then become more aware of what you are allowing into your mind space, into your intellectual space, your physical, and then even emotional and spiritual spaces. So rather than trying to sit in silence and removing all of the noise, I say, let's be messy. Let's dance with our thoughts. Let's become aware of it so that we can then understand. So in that understanding, we can then make better choices. The last thing that I'm going to say is everything that we're talking about here in the diets, the choices, our activities, how we approach leadership and work, it's never black and white. It is never black and white. There is a beautiful gray area in there that is just messy and convoluted, and we don't understand what it is, but that's how mindfulness and meditation can help you love into it. So I hope that that resonated with some people, and just wanted to leave you with that thought.
It's a very powerful one. It's more, you talk to this, it's more a way of life than it is an actual practice. It's life and ceremony and intention and embodiment and making those small choices to just love yourself, because it begins with us. If we can't show that compassion or make that one choice for us, that's going to feed into everything else we're creating. So if we're on a mission to have the highest level of serving humanity, we have to be able to give us that kindness in return. It can't be this selfless, let me just push it all out there and I'm the one that's like you're driving yourself to the ground. That's not how it's meant to be. Although the culture of the entrepreneurial culture has been built on that for quite some time. I see it changing though. There are a lot of people wanting to change that narrative, which is why I'm grateful that all of you are here today to have the discussion. Dr. Pedre or Natanya, I don't know if you want to expand on the whole breath work and meditation portion.
I wanted to say that we feed our guts with food, but we feed our brains with our thoughts. So the same way that you want to choose the right foods to eat, you also want to be really intentional about the thoughts that you hold and you feed your brain, because those thoughts then become who you are and they become your reality and they affect your body and they affect your health. I'm a very strong believer in the importance of mindset and meditation and breath work as part of the healing process. And actually through my work here in New York City with highly stressed out people who can come into my office and would check off the box, eating the right foods, eating their salads for lunch, taking all the supplements at all the right times, but they're running around their day. They're stressed as can be. They're like barely stopping for lunch, swallowing it in front of their computer, and they're running their lives in this hyper stressed out fashion. And what I learned from working with them is you can put them on the most perfect diet and the most perfect supplement program, and they won't heal, because you cannot out diet and you cannot out supplement a stressed out lifestyle. So the stress is just as important. Dealing with the stress and learning management tools to be able to unstress the body and to get from sympathetic to parasympathetic rest and digest state is a key to healing the body, because we have to be in that receptive state where the vagus nerve is firing, and that tells your body that it is safe. If your body does not feel safe, your body cannot heal. And unfortunately, we have an epidemic of people walking around not feeling safe in their bodies. Lots of fear, lots of sympathetic overactivation with too many stimulus, whether it's internet, smartphones, everything. So for me, it's a huge key to it. And obviously, I've written books about the gut and about diet, nutrition, but I piggyback in there because I think people aren't still. I think we're kind of learning. But I piggyback in there the importance of mindset, of breath work, of meditation, and how important that is for healing the body.
Yeah. And I would, if I can add like one line, I think that the end benefit is things that even the most stressed out high achievers can measure, right? So we can measure improved focus, concentration, mental clarity, reduced anxiety, right? Overall performance actually improves. So it's how you feel. It's also how you perform, as well as the choices that you make. And all those things are iterative. So if you start in one place, it'll start to fuel another. So, if you start with the mindfulness, perhaps, or listening to yourself and helping bring down those stress from a hormone level, those can help contribute to the healthier gut microbiome if you start to work on those micro changes. And so it's cumulative and it's iterative and it's measurable in a lot of ways, as everyone said. And so I think it's worth it. It's not about giving up. It's about going towards.
I've heard this thing said that you don't meditate to get good at meditation. You meditate to get better at life.
Yeah, that's true. For me, I think being a meditator for a very long time, I feel sometimes you feel like you're prisoner of your own mind, right? These thoughts, there are some thoughts which is like not really like not what you like, but it's just constantly coming and coming. So the best thing my guru mentioned to me was let it flow through. So all thoughts should just flow through, let it happen. Then it calms down, because you cannot try to calm down a tsunami. It has to calm down on its own. So, like breathing really like helps a lot with that. Like just taking that deep breath, like oxygenates like your whole mind, and that kind of like helps it calm down a whole lot. So, and I think we are all in zombie mode today, where we are not kind to ourselves. And I was, when I was a kid, I was instructed by one of my school teachers that, do whatever you want in your life, but don't pity yourself. And I felt that was the best advice I've ever got in my life. But I realized over time that's such a worst advice I ever got in my life, because I became this person who is like giving, 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 giving. I had nothing left. Like I had no energy in me to give anymore. I think a little compassion should be there for our own self, and that's how you can feel compassion for others much stronger. If that is not, the kindness should be there for our own self rather than others. But it just enhances the feeling for the other person as well. But if I'm not able to pity myself, I'm not able to have compassion for my own self, that's not gonna, like for the world, my offering will not be the same. So yeah.
I wanted to ask you guys, because it's going to be 6 p.m., but there's like questions in the audience. Can you stay like 10 minutes longer, or do you guys have a hard stop? I know this is not typical for webinars, but I want to go with the flow, and there's like some great feedback and some questions. And I also wanted to close it out with asking you guys as well, like, what does the future of health and mental health look like for all of you? But can we go to some of do you have time first? Can you stay a little bit longer?
Sure.
Like 5 or 10 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the questions, like John Runyon, who's an incredible human sitting in Sedona right now, he asked, how closely tied is inflammation with insulin resistance? Which I know anyone can chime into this one, I'm sure, or Dr. Pedro, Natanya, or Swathi.
Yeah, I mean, those two things are synonymous, or they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And microbiome changes are also connected to both of them. So, and leaky gut. So, when you have dysbiosis and leaky gut, then you get more of an influction of endotoxin from gram-negative bacteria in the gut. But endotoxin also comes after you eat, especially if you eat inflammatory oils like seed oils, even saturated fats. And that endotoxemia that happens from the endotoxin getting in the bloodstream has actually been shown to be a predictor of metabolic syndrome that leads to weight gain, obesity, and diabetes. So they're all interconnected, and it basically scrambles the internal signaling system. And then you start building more fat in the middle, and that fat then secretes cytokines that are the same inflammatory signals that your white blood cells also secrete. So it becomes this feed forward cycle until you do something to break the cycle and get yourself out of it.
Someone else asked, and we didn't have time to fully cover it, which is the gut. We talked about it on the surface, just the gut brain axis. And do you guys have any studies or one in particular to bring forward that shows that how that axis, how important it is, how interconnected it actually is, how it's impacting our moods and everything else more than we can possibly even comprehend right now?
I could talk about it for a moment if you want, and then
Yeah.
to the doctor. So the gut and brain communicate bidirectionally, right? So it's this gut brain axis we talk about, or the second brain, depending on how you want to look at it, right? And so that's the microbiome and the microorganisms, they're really important in that connection. And so there are these neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and GABA, well, it doesn't matter what they are, but let's just say there are these things that happen between that are signaling, right? And they're involved in basically literally regulating mood, emotions, cognitive function. And so I think the whole old school method of snap out of it, is really unfair, because it's like Swathi was saying before, you can try and tell yourself, I want to feel better about this. But if your gut system is chemically wired not to, it's really like you're fighting up against a tidal wave of signaling that's happening in your body. So that's kind of one thing there, I guess. So when you have that imbalance, the neurotransmitters essentially become affected, and that has been shown clinically in peer-reviewed journals to affect anxiety and depression specifically. And in fact, they're looking at treatments to adjust the biome to treat anxiety and depression successfully, which is incredible if you think about it. And yes, there's some poop involved. So, because, that always makes everyone laugh. So, and then that also goes in hand with the inflammation that we talked about as well, in terms of the low grade or high grade inflammation that's happening at a chronic level, which again has been clinically tied to anxiety and depression, whether they be, and to me, the biggest thing about it is the personalization that Dr. Pedro is talking about, and in the video of the opening, as well as the preventative side. So, mostly in Western medicine, we are, I stepped on a tack and my foot is bleeding and it hurts. And the first thing they'll say is, well, here's some medicine for the pain, or maybe we'll address the wound. And sort of the functional medicine or the gut approach is really more about, well, let's take the tack out and think about why did you happen to step on it in the first place? So if you can kind of redo some of those foundational things, that loop that is spurning you on chemically can kind of be rewritten and reprogrammed, and then you can have that better connection of mindfully willing your thoughts and feelings into a place that reduces anxiety and depression.
Does anyone else want to chime in?
I can jump in with actually I was doing a presentation on the HPA axis, which controls our reaction to stress and whatnot. And part of it is tied to the limbic system, which is, think of it as the reptilian brain. And they were looking at a study in mice. Now, mice aren't humans, but they can be models for what happens in humans. And they were using germ-free mice versus mice that have normal bacteria in the gut. And the interesting thing is they found that the mice that had no microbiome actually developed overactivation. This was early in life after birth. They developed overactivation of the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that reacts to stressors, but actually can create PTSD. So you can kind of imagine how you might apply this to like actual humans. But then they took the germ-free mice and they gave them Bifidobacterium infantis, which is the first bacteria that develops in the microbiome of a baby as it's being breastfed. And it rewired the limbic system and lowered the hyperreactivity of the limbic system. So now these mice that now had the right gut microbiome actually were able to regulate their stress response. Now, the way I think of this is a patient that I met the other day who was adopted and raised by foster parents, probably not breastfed, so maybe didn't get that initial very important population of the gut microbiome, and has a very high anxiety score. So we can look at that in humans and how this is affecting and thinking about, if you're a mom and you're going to be a parent and you're thinking about breastfeeding versus not breastfeeding, breastfeeding is extremely important in developing that early microbiome that is actually shaping the development of the brain and the limbic system and the way that that child is going to react to stressors in their lives. The other study I want to briefly mention, because we were talking about the vagus nerve, is the importance of the vagus nerve in depression. So they took people with treatment-resistant depression who did not respond to any medication. Some of them were on multiple medications, and they used a vagal nerve stimulation device. And now in my book, I teach vagal nerve activation through things like humming, breath work, meditation. All these things can activate the vagus nerve. They use the vagal nerve stimulation device. And out of those people who were not responding to anything, 37% improved and their depression resolved just by activating the vagus nerve, which, by the way, traverses the vocal cords on either side. That's why singing, chanting, humming, all those things, creating that vibration with the vocal cords helps to reactivate that vagus nerve that a lot of people are walking around with low vagal tone.
Yeah, that longest cranial nerve, and again, doesn't cost anything to use and activate, which I love, that these are tools within us.
I love it. Well, we have 5 minutes. It'll cut off by 6:15 Eastern. I just wanted to go around the horn to each of you and I sound like a sportscaster. That's my my former life. I used to do that. And they always used to say, let's go around the horn. But anyway, I wanted to ask you individually, what does the future of health and medicine look like from each one of your individual perspectives? I mean, we've gotten a lot of beautiful feedback from the audience. They're thanking us with a lot of gratitude, world-class panels. And I'll tell everyone who has joined us today, we'll be sending out on Tuesday a microsite where you can reach out to all of our panelists and our supporting partners that make these conversations possible. But I do want to end it with your thoughts on what the future of health and medicine looks like. We can start with you, Swati.
Sure. So, disease-free life in one sentence. That's what is the future of medicine looking like. Also, like I think there are so many people who are trying to solve these micro level problems, but there is no actual personalization. So we are all solving puzzles of personalization. So tying all those puzzles together is going to get us that right personalization that the person needs, because we have a lot of problems and we are all only solving the micro problems of it. So when that personalization is achieved, I think that is the future of health that's looking like for each person. So that's how I, foresee the future.
Love it. Natanya?
Sure. I guess to build on that, and thanks, Swati, for that, I'm very aligned, and I think that's an exciting thing, so that the blue zones become everywhere, right? So that tailoring treatments to the individual, to the specific gut profile, really has the potential to improve so many outcomes, right? And including mental health management, but even performance, well-being, and as we're also seeing, longevity, right? Overall, the quality of the life and the duration, and that those developments of these novel therapeutic approaches that target the gut microbiome, they show this promise. And, sometimes there are things like stimulating the vagus nerve, probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, fetal microbiotic, gut transplantation, right? So there's a lot of things on the event horizon that are here and are coming. Our testing is getting more sophisticated. And so it's an exciting time, and and we don't have to solve it all today, but that any one of us has the tools within us to make some small changes. And that's the thing that I get excited about. You don't have to be a biohacker and longevity science multimillionaire to change the course of your life.
Dr. Pedre?
I love all these things you've said. I said it in the intro video that I think personalization is a big part of the future of health, and also really understanding and coming to have a great respect for the role that the gut microbiome and gut health plays on so many other aspects of the body: hormone balance, skin, brain, lung health, heart health, all those things. One thing that I didn't mention that I think is part of the future of health is AI. I think is going to play a big role in that. And I think ultimately understanding that healing happens at 3 different levels. And if you want to truly heal, you have to heal at all levels. And a lot of people get stuck on trying to heal the physical body. But in order to truly heal, we have to heal at all 3 levels, which is the physical body, the mental, emotional body, and then the spiritual body. And when you heal all those 3 aspects, that's where you fully heal yourself and you're able to actualize and live the life that you want or that you dream of. And I think that requires a shift in the consciousness of humanity across the entire world to understand that we are not just physical beings, that we are beyond that we are the spiritual beings that are in these physical bodies. And if we can start to see that and recognize the importance of healing, not only in the present, but also understanding that all of your timelines need to be healed. And that includes going back into the past where a trauma happened as a child and going and healing that trauma that is playing a role now in your present self. That is how we achieve. And I think that is the future of health is recognizing all of these things and probably also incorporating psychedelics and all that. I know we're not talking about that, but I think these are all tools to be able to reach certain levels of consciousness and awareness and understanding that healing is a multidimensional thing that happens across not just this timeline, but it can happen across many timelines, and you can heal something that happened to you in the past, even now in the present.
What a beautiful and powerful way for us to end this entire session. I'm really grateful for our panelists today. They gave so much love, heart, and information for all of you. Thank you to our audience. A heartfelt thank you. I know you have options and choices, and you chose to spend your time with us today. I look forward to the next one, which will be in a few weeks from now. This will also become a podcast episode if you want to share it with loved ones to inspire them to start making those micro moments and those changes in their health today. And we'll send out contact information in our little, what we call the virtual swag bag on Tuesday so that you can get in contact with our panelists if you're inspired to continue the dialogue. Stay blessed, everyone. Stay inspired and just continue to do you and be a huge expansion of who you are, your expression in the world. Until the next time, stay blessed. Ciao. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast episode where we strive to create positive change and blueprint action items for that more inclusive world. We hope you're leaving us with heart full, with your heart energy ready to become a change agent in the world that you're inspired to believe that the impossible is possible. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with our extraordinary panelists of futurists, disruptors, innovators, and dreamers. If you want to learn more about our mission at The Future Of, as well as InFUUSE, you can stay up to date on future episodes and join our community. In the show notes, you can sign up for a newsletter. If you want to follow my journey, feel free to find me on Instagram under @Tanyette. That's TANYETTE. You can find me on LinkedIn @Tanyette Cologne. And also you can follow InFUUSE on LinkedIn as well, INFUUSE.com. Of course, I want to hear about your journey and stories as well. So feel free to send me an email at Tanyette@IN-FUUSE.com. I would love to highlight how some of the change agents and the things that you're learning with us are translating into your day-to-day life. Stay blessed. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you at our next virtual roundtable discussion. Ciao, con mucho amor. Bye.